And welcome everyone. Today's discussion topic is doing educational programs and how we go about navigating that landscape, whether we move forward with them, whether we try to make some plan Bs, or we just cancel everything for the next school year, since so much is still unknown with schools and everybody. So, you know, we can, like I said, we can, with every discussion, we can take it where it goes. So does anybody want to get us started off with what's on their mind the most, or what's the burning question? Jen.
One thing I'll just start off by sharing, this is Jen from Viterbo in La Crosse. We have had we've begun to have some conversations with some teachers and also with some of the superintendents or principals in local school districts, just to ask the question of if they are even going to allow field trips to happen. And we've heard, some of them have not made that decision yet, but we have heard from a couple that they aren't going to allow any sort of field trip, at least in the fall, possibly in the spring, but definitely not in the fall. So we had some school series performances that we had scheduled for the fall that we are now looking to see if we can potentially move or postpone into the spring sometime. Just knowing that it's likely that if we even put those events out there, that we may not have any sort of audience for them because nobody can come. So that's kind of where we're starting.
Thanks, Jen. That's a great place to start. That's what I was wondering, if anybody's reached out to any of those of the schools. I mean, I suppose if you reach out to teachers, they probably don't know. So going to the principals or superintendents is a great way to go. Mary?
We're kind of in a very similar mode to Jen. We only had 2 scheduled in the fall, and I have not actually spoke to our superintendents. I may still do that more in terms of the whole school year, but just anticipating that fall is probably going to be the most questionable. So we are also looking at moving all of ours to spring and hoping that by then most of the schools are allowing outings.
Okay. Amy?
I as well have had conversations with at least 3 superintendents to try to get a read on what next school year is going to look like. They don't have crystal balls. They don't know. They're waiting for some guidance from the state DPI before they make any decisions. But like Jen said, they're anticipating not allowing field trips. They're also anticipating not allowing artists into their facilities as well. Because I'd ask that question, if you're not allowing your kids to go on a field trip, would you allow an artist to come into your building for in-school field trips? And they said, probably not. So I'm in a holding pattern. I have sent an email to my educators just saying that we're holding tight in announcing what our education programs are. My plan is to not offer any fall field trips, but to try to work with artists and such to try to see what kind of alternative programming we can offer, because I don't want to just cancel and not offer anything at all. So to try to work with the teachers and the artists and maybe our local resources to try to offer some kind of enrichment lessons. The challenge is, and also talking with the superintendents, is that they're not going to be able to pay for it. So if you do offer any kind of online enrichment in the classroom, you're going to have to find alternate funding for it, because they said as a school, I'm not going to be able to pay a ticket price for it, because usually if the kids went on a field trip to your venue, they would have the parents pay for it. They're not going to ask the parents to pay for an in-classroom lesson. So that provides some additional challenges if you're working with an artist to provide some in-classroom content. Now, where are you getting the revenue ticket income now to help pay for that? So then we're going to need to look for some grant funding or some alternate funding to then try to fund these alternate programming. So lots of things to research and think about.
Thanks, Amy. Diane?
I also had a conversation with our superintendent, and who has been in touch, of course, with the local ones, and he suggested reaching out to our local CISA organizations too, because sometimes they know things that everybody else doesn't. They're a little closer in touch with the state, so I thought I would check with them as well.
Thanks, Diane. Sally?
I have a question. When you're referring to these outreaches, are they also connected to a performance that would be that evening as well? Because those are the ones that we do. We currently are not just doing regular educational without a performance associated with it.
Thanks, Sally. So so I think we're talking specifically educational programs geared towards field trips of students, but then also the aspect of if an artist comes in and does an offering during the daytime, that's also a part of this.
Right. So I guess my question is, are you moving the entire thing if there is like a performance associated with it, or would you just be canceling the educational component?
Great question. Mary, go ahead.
We also do some of those, just a few a year. My intent at this point is to keep the performance on the schedule. And we're just going to have to depend on when we get to that performance, whether the school will let us in or not. The only real drawback to that is I have one for sure where we applied for the Arts Midwest money, a grant to get back because of the outreach. So if the outreach doesn't happen, we may not get that grant money. And we have another one that's a local sponsorship that always asks that their money be tied to a show with a school outreach. I'm not quite as worried about that one. I think if the outreach is canceled, because of everything, they would still sponsor the show, but that's also not guaranteed. But those amounts are relatively small. At this point, I'm thinking we'll go ahead with the performance, whether the outreach can happen or not. And that'll just be dependent on the school's choice, not ours.
Cool. Thanks, Mary. Any others have the same kind of situation where you have an evening show that you think you want to keep on the calendar, but the outreach is questionable, and thoughts on that, or what's your plan? Josiah?
To go off with that, those who have artists that come in and work with your band and orchestra or choir, has there been conversations with the music teachers and superintendents about that yet? Because I have a show in March with a German group who I'm still crossing my fingers that they can come over to the States, that is working with the students. And so I know that's in March, but I know how schools work where they could flat out say no contact for the whole year. So I'm just curious, what are people's thoughts on that, or how are they handling that part?
That's a great question, because also there's the issue surrounding that with band, choir, and some of the health concerns with having a bunch of people singing. It's different than having a piano master class. Whereas if you're doing a singing class with a group of students and everybody's, or like you say, they're working with your choir, that puts a lot of people more in close proximity with, projecting their spit into the air. So that's a problem. Diane, go ahead.
Just as a little uplifting thing, my husband, the band director, has said that on his forums that he's been on of late, or maybe it was just in research he's come across, that there is conflicting evidence as to whether band people especially need that whole huge range that they were saying they needed in order to not contaminate each other. So there's more info that says it's just the same distance as a normal conversation. So that's still probably 6 feet, but it's at least some good news, maybe, you know.
Yep. Got to be positive. You know, I was thinking too, not to get off on a tangent, but if testing is made more widely available, and, you know, especially if, and whether it's high school, college, or whatever, can get tested and have a negative test and be prove that they don't have it, well, I can spit on you all day if I don't have it. So not that you want me to do that, but, you know, so depending on how some of those testing things go, if we can clear people and be very, very confident and not have necessarily the fear of false negatives with things like that, then that might be a whole different landscape too, if we're able to, even if it's pre-vaccine, but we're able to get some very, very accurate testing, and we feel very confident that if we are singing in a group that everybody in that group has tested negative, that's a very different feeling too then. Tiana.
Just keep in mind, it depends if we're allowed to do testing, like does it have to be done by a health professional, or is it schools can have the ability to do that, or venues, right? And if it does occur in a time period of 5 minutes and it actually is legit, because you have to remember people can be asymptomatic. So even if you have no symptoms, you don't have a fever, you could still be a carrier, which will infect. So just keeping those things in mind, because now we're also talking about, can an artist physically come into our buildings if they show symptoms, and then what happens to the show if they do, right? So just keeping those things in mind.
Yep. Mary, go ahead.
The other question I have with all of that is, and I was wondering this myself all along, and I have heard comments about it as they've talked about testing, is the time frame. So an artist comes in and says, you know, here, I had a negative test, but it was a week ago even. That doesn't guarantee that you're still negative. So there's a whole question of how recent does that test have to be, even just for that artist or artist group, to prove that they are safe.
Right. Anyway, I didn't want to get us off on too far of a tangent away from the educational components, but any other on what you've done, has anybody reached out to, like, if you had or have groups booked, have you reached out to some of the touring groups yet to get their feedback, you know, on what they're doing, or plan Bs or things with negotiating with the actual artists? Anybody go that direction or have feedback on that? Mary?
I have not, but the other question I have is over the spring and even into the summer, I'm seeing some of those youth theaters offer things virtually. I'm wondering if anyone has heard anything or considered anything about offering schools virtual performances through us, and whether we could, you know, legitimately charge for that.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's what I was wondering too. Because I've seen TheaterWorks USA has put out some things. I believe I saw Arts Power, and I'm sure they're all doing that, because the other concern in all of this is if we all sort of have the general feeling that we're just not going to be able to do shows for schools in the fall, that's a huge concern for those artists that that's their livelihood. And so, you know, if we can be creative and find ways to try to still, like Amy said, we still do some kind of programming, even though it may look very different, because we can't go to their venues, they can't come to ours, they necessarily maybe can't pay for it. So what might that look like? And then, you know, from the school standpoint, if you were to offer them a virtual experience that could be grant funded, is that, you know, what do you think their feeling would be on that? Do they want to get all the kids together in an assembly, put up a giant screen to do this? I mean, you know, I don't know what the reaction would be to that. Any other thoughts along those lines of how we get creative and try to do programs in the fall, given all of our limitations?
Hi, Jennifer Farrell here. I'm with Engler Center for the Performing Arts in Chilton. And I don't really have answers on that other than I know I had a dance studio reach out to me, and originally they were just gonna, they had rescheduled and then rescheduled again. And now they're asking if they could come in August. Obviously, I don't have any answers. I set up a meeting next week to talk with my superintendent. But I might reach out to Stisa as well, so I appreciate that recommendation. But yeah, I'm kind of just trying to figure out, like, for her, she's wanting to know if she can come in with her students, record here without an audience, and then virtually, in collaboration with us, put that out there. So I'm, going to talk with her today as well, and just hopefully keep discussing things until we figure it out. I don't really have any answers on that, but I'm kind of hoping it's kind of like a trial and error of figure out what works, what doesn't work, and go from there. But yeah, I'd be curious to know if anybody has thought through anything like that further, or if anybody else is getting asked to do a later recital or other theater programs. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Diane, and then Kim. I see your physical hand, Kim.
This doesn't address what Jen just asked, but a bit earlier. Well, if we were to offer something virtual, you wouldn't necessarily have to herd all those kids together, because up here, at least most of our students, most of our schools don't have a theater that they could watch on a big screen. But most classrooms, I think, up here have smart boards or intelligent boards. And so the kids are used to watching on a fairly large screen, at least in their classroom. So I would think that would work, and then they'd be able to do it on their own schedule too. It wouldn't be necessarily locked into a specific time, maybe. I don't know. I don't know how things are further south, but up here in our little neck, we have quite a few of those boards. Our whole school everybody's got one.
Thanks, Diane. That's a great point. Kim, then Jen.
Good morning, Kim from the Wild Center in Sheboygan. But I am at home and I have 2 dogs, so they haven't barked yet. I guarantee you they will. We did have a hip hop dance school that was looking to perform again or have their recital, and that equaled 3 shows of close to 1,200 people for each show, all in one day. So confidentially, I was dreading the conversation, dreading the thought that they would come at all. But this is what they have come up with tentatively. We still have to, figure it all out. And our Sheboygan County supervisors have not come up with anything that really makes people feel good about being in Sheboygan and outside in the public. So they're thinking that they're going to bring in classes. So they might have a class of 25 kids and they would let them perform on the stage. It would take maybe 15 minutes for a total in and out, allow only 4 people for each child in. So they're figuring that's about 250 people. And we just run the kids through that way so they can get to do a recital. There's a lot to think about with that, and I'm not sure if it's going to happen, but at least they're not thinking about it until later in August. So that is one way that they could cleverly get around the 3 shows of close to 1,200 people each, and we I think of the revenue we'll lose, because they would have also had 5 days of practice and a huge rental, and it's hard. But I thought that was a different way to think about it, and it was more doable than I had imagined they would come up with. We'll work on it.
Thanks, Kim. Jen.
I was just going to go back to the idea of streaming something. That is something that we are starting to talk about. I don't have great information yet because we're really just starting to kind of look into it. But as an example, one of the titles that we have in the fall currently in November is We the People, which I think is a TheaterWorks title. And they are going to do some sort of either live stream of it or a recording that you can stream. The content of that is timely to the fall because of the election season. So if that's something we can put out to schools around the time that they would be talking about those things, we'd like to keep those opportunities available for them. So obviously we'll have to figure out the funding and how we'd offer something like that and if we charge for it at all or not. But that is something that we're going to look into and try to at least have maybe some content available to some of our schools throughout the fall so that there's at least some sort of connection with us.
Thanks, Jen. Other thoughts along those lines? Josiah.
So are you going to have to get a special license? Sorry, this is Josiah in Watoma. Are you going to have to get a special streaming license to stream anything, or is that going to be solely on the dance company, on Arts Power, TheaterWorks, all the shabam of it? I was just curious. I don't know, because I don't want to go through and have to get a license.
Yeah, I don't know the logistics of that all either, but I would imagine that if they are going to either live stream it or they're going to record it somehow, that they're taking care of all of their licensing requirements, because they wouldn't be able to make it available if they didn't have the proper licensing. So they may charge us a fee then to cover their licensing, and then we'd have to figure out how we absorb that fee if we just cover it, or if we get a funding source like Amy suggested. So yeah, we also, being a university campus, we may have some university productions we're looking to actually stream. So we're also looking into those kinds of things, because then we will have to figure out streaming licenses and all of that kind of stuff on our end. But for anything that I think a company is putting out, I think that's on them to figure out how they charge that.
And come back tomorrow at 10 a.m. because that's what the discussion will be all about. So thanks for the teaser on that. We will be getting into the nitty gritty of all of that fun stuff tomorrow as well. So so we can certainly, any of those issues with these kinds of things with school shows and then any other shows we'll be definitely diving into tomorrow as well. Josiah.
All right. Thank you, Jen, for bringing that up too. To go off of the whole educational thing, has anyone had conversations with their theater directors about how they're going to tackle productions in the fall in your space? I haven't heard anything on our end, but I'm just curious if anyone's heard anything, like Diane, if any of the people at your school has talked about it, or one of you guys, whoever. I'm just curious on how you guys are going to handle that part. For us, I think we don't surpass the 400 or 300 mark on some of these, our school, like plays or musicals. So that's kind of a blessing. But at the same time, I still would rather not have 200 plus people right next to each other in my space when it doesn't get cleaned as often as it should be. So I don't know if anyone's had those type of discussions yet with those people.
Thanks, Josiah. Diane?
Diane Veal, Lucille Tech Center for the Arts. Where do I even work? I don't know. Sorry, I've forgotten to mention that all this time. I'm guessing that there won't be theater things, and I don't think there will be concerts as we know them either. I don't, they're going to be fortunate, those bands and choirs, if they can even somehow find a way to meet in a large group setting. So there won't be any theater things, any school things anyway, that we need to worry about. I think the only thing we'll need to worry about will be whatever we present, and in keeping things limited.
Thanks, Diane. Tim?
Yes, Tim Phillips at Winnebago County Community Arts Center. Going on with that same question, I am the theater director as well at our facility, and you're exactly right. Everything is so up in the air. I don't know that we usually do a high school play in the fall. Don't know that we will actually be able to do that. And as well, our choir and band music departments, I sit on all their meetings. Conversation right now is trying to figure out, okay, can we even have rehearsals in a normal situation in their rooms, or is it going to be going to very small ensembles and working with individuals, almost going back to basics rather than teaching choir and band in the sense that we know it, teaching music in small, very small class settings.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate the insight. I know for my, I work at Wisconsin Lutheran College, and I'm kind of leaving a lot of that to the academic side because they need to figure out how, if they're going to be able to rehearse and what that might look like. But I've thrown the idea out that for our band and choir, that we somehow, for a performance, if they're able to do rehearsing of some kind for a performance, that we would do it virtually and try to space them out throughout the entire hall, especially for like band, you know, just, and somehow get it recorded or, you know, streamed so that their parents could still see and you know, all of that. But I'm sort of on the same page as Diane. I think in person, you know, coming to a concert with 300 people for band or choir probably is not going to be feasible, at least in the fall. And then for our theater, I've talked to our theater director. They are going to try for their opening September show. They're going to do a Shakespeare play in the style that Shakespeare used to do it. So they kind of don't necessarily rehearse very much. They kind of each get their lines and their lead-in line, and it's more improv. And so they're going to try to work on doing something like that where then the staging could be socially distanced more, and they could, you know, have it just very much kind of that old style where you could speak to somebody from 6 feet away and it makes sense because it's stylized theater. So they're going to actually work on something like that and try to still do a performance. So that way in that space, then I'm going to attempt to ticket it with a, you know, an abridged seat map with the social distancing. So that's kind of where our theater and music folks are thinking. But as far as, you know, then they're planning a slightly bigger production in November. So we'll have to see like what that looks like. And I'm kind of waiting on the college's restrictions and what comes out for what that'll all look like, which I think we all have to kind of wait on. Or we just all do, like, I think I said this before, we all just do like Greek plays and put everybody in a mask anyway. Other thoughts or different concerns? Josiah, you go ahead.
So has anyone announced their school series? I know, Amy, you haven't. Widener Center, I don't know if you have yet. Okay. So did you, Diane? Okay. I don't know, did Overture Center? Because I think, is it Wausau, I think did, and then Oshkosh.
Yes.
So what is your response with your educational shows, Jared? I'm just curious.
Yeah, we've had a pretty good response and already had to cancel several of the shows. So I don't have good numbers to bring. I was hoping to bring along Mary Rose, who's in charge of our onstage series, but which is what we call our student matinees. But unfortunately, I was not able to bring her along today to have good numbers for you. But we had good, strong sales early on because it launched right around the same time as the rest of our season. We had an online virtual launch for that with many thousands of people attending. It was a good start. We've had to cancel at least, we're basically canceled most of the fall pieces at this point. There's only 1 or 2 left, I think, and it's only a matter of time. We're moving people into others, but it's sort of a chasing our tail game at this point too.
Thanks, Jared. Jen?
Two things. We have not announced our school series yet. We were actually very close. We're in production on the brochure right now, but we know that some of our fall titles are likely to fall out. So we're kind of holding right now in the brochure to see if those are going to move, because we can move them quickly before we send out the brochure. So right now we're just in a holding pattern, but we are hoping we can announce soon in the next couple weeks. One other thing I was going to mention is that we've already started talking about what happens when we do start having performances, perhaps in the spring, and how do we deal with potentially social distancing guidelines still being in place, or school groups that may still be a little nervous about coming to see something even if they can. So we've talked about reducing our capacity and our show setup so that we're not selling the full theater, but maybe only selling a half of it or so that we can't socially distance every single student, but we can distance the school groups and maybe put a couple of rows between each group, or several seats in the middle. We have continental style seating, so we don't have center aisles. So putting several seats in the middle of the theater between the groups that we're seating on either side, so that at least when the school groups come, they can stay sort of sequestered within their own school group and not be right next to students from other schools.
Cool, thanks. Mary and then Kim.
We did announce ours a couple weeks ago, which I'm already kind of regretting because now it is changing again. Some of those we actually canceled 4 shows between April and May. We rescheduled 2 of them, one in fall, one in spring. So most of the response we had was people who had signed up for those transferring their tickets to the new date next school year. But now when we have to change it again, I'm not sure how that'll go. Our response to other shows has been pretty slow, I think, because the schools don't know if they're going to be allowed or not. We were doing it without any deposits or anything and assuring them if they're not allowed to come, we'll just cancel it. Our other challenge is we typically did 2 shows in a day and are evaluating still if we need to adjust those times to allow for cleaning in between. I'd like to keep the 2 shows because it would allow for some spacing if that's still an issue. But then we have to also make sure we can go through and do a complete cleaning in between as well. But we did announce, and honestly, I would have probably should have waited because now we're changing it already again.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Mary. Kim? No? Okay. She changed her mind. Any other thoughts? One thing that Amy brought up the point too of, even I think if it becomes physically possible for school groups to travel in the spring, there may be the budget issue and the money issue. Has anybody thought along those lines yet as far as reaching out to potential sponsors? Obviously, if you've been doing grants for your school shows, I'm sure you're still working on those. But sponsors or special donors that you've thought, we might need to have this funded, even if we are able to hit the go button in spring, but schools are still struggling, or even like we've said, a lot of families have been dealing with unemployment issues. That ticket price, passing that along to families, is maybe a huge issue, and that may be something that we think about through the spring, but even into the next school year, as we think about reaching out to potential sponsors, donors, and applying for grants. So thoughts on that, Josiah?
So I've been thinking about that too, but something that's kind of cool for us is that a lot of the schools, buildings in my area, they have a PTO or PTA that spends the money on it. So I'm assuming their budget's still it's probably not big, but it's probably still sustainable. So a lot of times when we get a check-in, it's usually not from the school, it's from the PTO. So I don't know if the other schools in your guys' areas have those still. I think still the parents have to pay some type of fee or whatever it is for the PTA and PTO, and they do a lot of fundraising, so it might be a little hard this coming year to do fundraisers for the PTA and the PTO. But I know we have that. But I've also considered, there's one particular donor who I want to approach on possibly just funding the whole thing, and then so then schools don't have to pay to come see a show. But that's just a thought. But yeah, check with the local schools with your PTA and PTOs. That's the perfect place to look.
Thanks, Josiah. I wouldn't have thought of that, so that's great. Mary.
Two things. We actually already have a schools series sponsor that we acknowledge every year, so we have something going towards that. But we've always said that's what helps us keep the prices lower rather than higher, which leads me, if people don't mind my asking the question, what other venues charge per child for a school time matinee show? We, as of last year, we're charging an average of $7 per child. And I have no idea, and I know in our case, most of that the school pays for, but they're charging back to the parents. I have no idea how that compares to other theaters or other areas, if anyone's willing to share that.
Thanks, Mary. Diane.
Regarding the PTOs and PTAs, they often pay for our students' fees, or at least for one show. Schools, area schools will. But I was concerned, Josiah, about the funding for those organizations drying up too, because many of the fundraisers that our PTA does are group things, you know, craft sales in a tightly packed gymnasium in the fall. And I don't think that's going to happen. At least if it does, it's going to be much less revenue. So I'm really concerned about them helping fund. And then what was the other thing I was supposed to say? What was my brain is just messy these days. It doesn't file well. Somebody just asked and I forgot what it was.
Mary asked about your pricing.
Yes, yeah. We charge $5 a student with one free per 20 paid. So it's been that way for 1,000 years and probably won't go up.
Thanks, Diane. Josiah.
Mary, ours was actually modeled after Shower Center. When I think it was when Tom was there, my predecessor took that model. So I don't know what the pricing was at that time, but ours is at $5, and then after every 16th child, it's a free ticket. And I don't want to raise it up. I thought about raising it up last year, but then I said no, and then I'm glad I didn't. So.
Does anyone charge higher for chaperones? I know back when we used to do it, it used to be $10 for adults and $6 for students. But then I just kind of got into like the group. I made the group rate all $6. But when we did have some homeschool groups kind of buy on their own, just through the box office and not get invoiced, it was $10 for adults and then $6 for students. And I never got too much, backlash for that, but I kind of thought for a while 10's kind of high, for a parent. And then if we had one homeschool group that I think she had like 4 or 5 kids. So, it's like she's paying $6 a child plus 10 for herself. I kind of thought, wow, that's kind of a commitment. Jen, go ahead.
Ticket prices are either $6 or $7, and we don't charge higher for chaperones. We actually, for every 20 tickets you get in the group order, you get a free ticket so that they can use that ticket for either students or chaperones. So if you have a free, or a kid that maybe needs a free ticket because they can't afford it, the teacher can use that at their discretion, or they can give it to chaperones if they need some help and don't have a way to get chaperones recruited otherwise.
That's great. Others, anybody want to share their pricing? Kim, then Josiah.
Okay, so bear with me. This is $5 or $6 or $7 or $10 for the school performances. Yes. Okay. we've never charged for the school performances. We don't charge the teachers. We don't charge the homeschoolers. We don't charge the kids. We go out and hustle sponsorships from the community to help us offset the price.
Wow, that's pretty.
I had no idea that people even did charge. So this is really eye-opening.
I'm glad you're here. And then one other point I wanted to make too, since we were differentiating earlier between like the school time educational programs versus an artist that came in to do outreach. Back when we used to do this, we used to have like a world music series, and we were already paying them their fee to come in and do the evening show, and they would we kind of just rolled that additional school program onto like their fee. So for those, when it was like a world music kind of more cultural thing, we only charged $1 for those. So it was just kind of a very nominal thing, so that we could have an accounting and make sure people were being accountable to that. So there was a difference when we did a specifically like TheaterWorks USA school field trip show versus an artist that came in and added on an outreach. So there was a different pricing structure for us in that regard. Jared, did I miss your hand, or did you change your mind?
I was just gonna talk about our structure too. It's similar. We're between $8 and $10 a head, dependent upon the show and where the show comes from. Every 15th ticket or after 15 are bought, I think, is free. And we do offer subsidies as well, dependent upon whether your school district meets certain funding criteria. There's some pieces based on free and reduced lunches and some other criteria as well.
Thanks. You make me want to get outside. You look like you're enjoying the weather.
Yeah, it's pretty gorgeous right now, and the kids are right here too, so that's pretty cool.
Yes. Okay. After this call, everybody go outside and stretch. Tiana.
Tiana from Carthage College in Kenosha. Kim, we're the same way. So I get either grants or sponsorships. We don't do a lot of school time at Carthage yet. We're still working on those. Just because for our guest artists, we're in a chapel and it's in pews, so it's a little more difficult for students to not be bustling around and being crazy in pews. But for our theater shows, like our Carthage College student shows, we trying to find times to work with schools with the student schedules. But yeah, we don't other institutions that I worked at, we did charge, but I have opted out because I know at least in our area, it's very difficult for some of the schools to be able to do all those field trips and get those opportunities. So I mean, I think for other people it works, but we don't. I go out and get sponsorships or grants to be able to help make it happen to offset the cost.
Thanks, Tiana. Other thoughts? We've got about a little over 10 minutes left. If anybody wants to ask any additional questions, or if there's something that we haven't covered. Tiana.
It just makes me so concerned because like we'll take artists into schools, and I mean, we had Jason Lyle Black, and at a school that doesn't even have all of the opportunities as most do, so they didn't have an auditorium or any sort. So they're in a gym, very, very tiny gym that's packed for over 500 kids, and it was such a joy to see that these kids don't get this exposure. And I am looking at the virtual aspect of it and seeing, because all of my guest artists, we do an outreach in a school. And so I'm looking forward to tomorrow, because I've been doing a lot of research on virtual and licensing and stuff like that, to be able to make that work. But at the same time, our schools it might work a little bit easier to reach that many students in a school because they can do it per classroom at the same time. It doesn't have the same impact, but I want to continue doing it. So I don't know. It's just more of a comment, because this is really hard, because that's the part of my job that I'm really focused on, is making sure bringing the arts into the schools, especially ones in Kenosha and Racine that are inner city and don't have opportunities or resources. And I think this is going to be years, and I don't know. This is a Debbie Downer moment. It's just really sad, and I just don't know how to do it as we're trying to fight and make sure we can even open our venues.
Yep. No, thanks, Tiana. It's all important to be able to share how we're feeling about it all, because it is challenging. And I agree with you. I think that I don't think there's going to be a single date that just sort of is the expiration date for all of this, and then everything's just back to the way it used to be. I think we're going to be, dealing with all of this for quite a while. So as we think about these things, we really have to try to think creatively and think about things that maybe we haven't ever, considered before, to try to, especially like you say, it's so important that we don't lose that element of reaching out to the schools and the students and the young ones, because they can't be forgotten in all of this as we focus on all the other logistics and, bringing patrons in and all of the hand sanitizer and all that stuff. We don't want to lose sight of that. So it's really important that we keep thinking along these lines of how can we do it. And I think, it'll become even more important for us to all continue those conversations, ongoing conversations with the PTAs, the principals, the superintendents, the CISA, whoever we get sort of into contact now with, to really kind of keep those contacts fresh and going, so that this can be an ongoing conversation as things sort of hopefully get better. And then, there may be ways to do some things. And I think it'll be a very, very much a transitionary period for quite a while. Oh, Jared has a kitty cat. That's got to brighten everybody's day.
If anybody needs a cat, we're fostering 4 at the moment, with more to come.
Oh.
This is Cotton.
Oh, when in doubt, put kittens on the screen. That just helps. Thanks, Jared.
You got it. Thanks, Todd.
We've got about 9 minutes left. Any other final thoughts, Josiah?
So is anyone going to offer some type of virtual experience this summer? We were supposed to have Prairie Fire Children's Theater in like 2 weeks. And obviously we had to postpone that to next summer just because the superintendent said nothing in the space, and also summer school's canceled for our students. So a board member brought this up, and I've been thinking about doing the same thing, about offering some type of, maybe like a talent show, doing like a local talent show via virtually, or some type of songwriting contest or something. I know the Janesville Performing Arts Center is doing some stuff like that. I wish Nathan was part of these conversations right now. No offense, not throwing him under the bus or anything, but it'd be kind of cool to, hear about his stuff. But I've been thinking about that. I don't know how much time I'm going to have to really do a lot of that, but it would be kind of cool to offer that stuff. I don't know if anyone's thought of that, or even doing it in the fall as well. If we can't have shows in the fall, maybe doing some type of event virtually in the fall. So just a thought out there.
Josiah, you might reach out to Emily Goretzky because Rising Stars is we're still trying to figure out how to have anything. So I know that she's brainstorming right now. It might be a good time to grab her and have that discussion.
Sounds good.
Thanks. Anyone else? Tiana?
Yeah, Josiah, that's one of the big things I'm trying to figure out. So at a campus, if we don't come back, depending on how we come back and what that looks like, I've been working, that's why I'm trying to figure out the music licensing. I got a little bit together for our commencement this Saturday that's going virtual to make sure that we are covered. And I'm learning that, a lot of social media platforms already have their own licenses. So being able to go forth on that, but we don't want the music mob coming after us, So I'm really looking into not necessarily our Performing Arts Series guest artists going virtually. I mean, I want to make that an option. I'm kind of hoping with Arts Midwest going virtual for our conference, which isn't ideal, but I'd like to see how artists are doing virtual home concerts, you know what I mean? Because I can look on their YouTube pages all day to see how they do a concert on stage, and we're not going to be able to see that in person, but I'm really curious of how they're actually going to do it from home. And that was one of my suggestions in our survey that we got, is seeing how they could do that. But if I can get, I mean, we already have all our theater licenses for our college students for our upcoming shows. So seeing if we can work with MTI that we can virtually perform that. It's not ideal, but how can we do it? Because we have to do it academically, because some of these are thesis and credits for classes.
Thanks, Tiana. I saw Mary first, then Kim, then Stephanie.
Okay, and you know, like 10 seconds passed, so now I have to remember what I was gonna say, because I'm with Diane. I feel like my brain is mush this week. We have talked about the virtual stuff also, and not just in terms of shows, but because we also have a community school of arts where we typically offer dance and music and visual arts and all of that. But the conclusion we came to for the summer is we're going to attempt to continue our dance program virtually, because that's an ongoing thing. Kids have done it for years. We wanted them to continue doing it for years. But all of our other stuff, like our visual arts, our theater, all that, we're not going to try and offer. But now these are classes, not performances, virtually, because our group's feeling was that these kids have been on virtual school for how many months? And with summer coming, we feel like both the kids and the parents are going to want to get those kids off the computers and doing stuff actively. And they're really not going to be interested in virtual class kind of things. But I'm really liking the idea for fall of thinking about some virtual connections with the schools instead of the school time shows, instead of the school outreach. So the other thought I just had as we were talking about this is we also have a resident community theater who gets their own licensing for certain things, and they already have a show they're licensed for and they're going to have to cancel. So now I'm thinking about whether there's a way we could get them involved in providing some virtual experiences. And we have also talked about doing like an online talent show or competition or something like that, that maybe people would participate in that, but nothing too formal, that especially that involves kids having to sit online somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Mary. Kim? Kim, you actually remuted yourself.
Okay.
There you go.
It's one of those weeks. How I can be pretty much in isolation and come down with pink eye on top of everything is beyond me, but I can barely see any of you. I wanted to talk to Lonnie about this, but we do have an agent who would like to talk to us, and I brought it up when she was talking with us yesterday. I'm going to run it by Lonnie, but there's a possibility that tomorrow is the streaming sort of talk that we're going to have, right?
Mm-hmm.
That she could join in, but I want to talk to Lonnie about it first. So stay tuned. We may have some ideas coming up. But I want to clear it with Lonnie first. And then, should Lonnie get a kitten? Jared, I'm trying to help you get rid of one.
I know a guy.
I have a 10-month-old that is like a kitten. It's funny. My neighbor is on me to get a dog, and I'm like, what? We were in a dog neighborhood. Everyone wants us to get a dog, and I'm like, nah, no, we're good. We got plenty of things to chase around. Stephanie.
Lonnie?
Yes, Karen.
I just got a hold of Julie at DPI. Do you want me to give her the link? She's saying she can join if everybody can stay on for just a little bit.
Sure. Yeah.
Alrighty, I'll send that to her. Hang on, everybody. Let's see what she can tell us.
In the meantime, Stephanie, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I don't know how many of you, I mean, we've all worked with Bill Blagg, but tonight he's doing his live stream event. I'm curious how that goes, like if that's maybe something Bill could do in the fall for Wisconsin schools and we could stream collectively or something. I don't know. Bill's just super engaging, and I think he would be an artist that would definitely be a good one to kind of see how it works with. So just random comment, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Yeah, he's a good one. Tiana.
No, I agree, Stephanie. I forgot about mentioning that. Yeah, I'm curious how I'm curious what it's going to look like because it is live too, and so it's interesting. I'm interested in how artists are going to make this work for everyone, for themselves and venues and outreach to be able to go streaming. So I mean, it's a really reasonable price too. Didn't he do like pre-advance at $8.99 and then $12.99 day of or something like that? And he had to increase his viewerships because he has a lot of people tuning in. So I can't watch it tonight. I'm not here, but it'd be interesting. I'd love to hear what everyone, if people are watching, how it goes.
Thanks. Does Mary or somebody, does anybody have that link that you could put in the chat? Kim?
Go to the Wild Center, enter it through the Wild Center. Thank you, Mary. We're partnering with Bill on that, and I take it that not other people on this chat are. But if you go in through the Wild Center's website, you can get the link. I'll be honest, we get a little cut of it, and that would be nice. But I think he's going to do a really good job. He's really been talking about it a lot. It's going to be a backstage look, if you will. He's brought in probably more production equipment than we can imagine. But it's a good experiment, and I do think that he is looking to see if this is something viable for more shows.
Okay, great. So Wild Center to get information, wildcenter.com.
Mm-hmm.
To check it out and buy a ticket for tonight at what time?
7 p.m.
7 p.m. our time, Midwest time. Yeah. Okay. Great. Josiah, then Tiana.
I was just gonna say this might be a cool thing because I wish we could bring in Bill Blagg, but I don't have the stage and the manpower to do all that stuff. So it'd be kind of cool if he would do it in the fall, have a conversation with him about doing that for our students virtually. That'd be that's a cool idea. I like that.
Cool. Thanks. Tiana, you get the final comment, and then Julie's here.
Awesome.
Oh my gosh, I just, because Kim was talking about bringing an agent on. I've mentioned it before in other sessions. It'd be we're having great conversations as presenters, right? But I am curious about bringing in the info from an agent. Bringing Bill, I think Bill would be great to add on a session after his experience of doing this. What is his take on it? You know what I mean? Because we can have from our view, but I am curious from an artist's side of moving forward, how safe do they feel coming into venues? Even though Bill has, people working, stagehands working, there's a lot of manpower to put on a show like his, right? So it's just, it's a lot of stagehands and coming in, but then also thinking about other artists that are bigger than a quartet, that are large on stage. So I'm curious if we want to add those components. I'm sure we'll get some of that at the Arts Midwest virtual concert or virtual conference, but I think that's just too far out for us to start making some decisions. It sounds like a lot of us, I don't know, as an institution, we're making those difficult decisions in July. So I got time, but no matter when we open, we're going to have some of these soft openings at some point too.
Thanks. All right, we have Julie here from DPI. Karen, do you want to introduce her?
Just one of my favorite people working at the Department of Public Instruction. Julie, you can give your formal title, but I will tell you she's a great resource for the arts community.
And you caught me on my dress down day, so I don't know if you can see this. Here we go. Can you see it?
Awesome.
My art will go on. I rarely wear t-shirts, but I needed to get into the mode today. So it's the messy hair. This is like really getting me natural hair.
So Julie, I'm not sure if you know much about the Wisconsin Presenters Network, but these are presenting organizations from around the state, and they are really grappling with the question of, what do we do about those fall matinees and student series that we have and have been planning on when teachers, different presenters are in touch with different superintendents in their area, so just wondering if you have any insight to share on that topic quickly, out of the blue with no time to prepare your thoughts. But
no problem. And actually, this is great timing because the Department of Public Instruction is pulling together a set of guidance pieces, and many will have to do with safe and healthy schools and safe and healthy facilities. And I know many schools have spaces that are performance spaces specifically that the community members also dive into and utilize. So that language is going to be coming out in a couple of weeks. I'm going to be tapping into it, looking at it more specifically. Okay, if we're saying that we need materials that will be used by multiple people, and in our case, multiple students, like paintbrushes and tubas, and how do we sanitize things properly and keep things stored so that they're safe and that we don't have these mitigation issues and other areas that we're concerned about. So I'm going to be looking more closely at that. I'm also having virtual office hours every week. They started out with just getting people to talk and just enjoying each other's company in March. April, we dove into online tools that they could potentially use with kids if they're doing online instruction. I know the choral band and orchestra people have been really very creative in their ensemble work. Because they can't get all of these kids together in one space, but they've been able to do some of it virtually in different ways. So they're grappling and working through those issues too. In June, we're going to start, second week of June, we're going to start with looking at those guidance documents from the Department of Public Instruction, as well as whatever else is out there that's going to be current. Whether it's the CDC guidelines, can't wait to read that, so excited, or the Badger Bounce Back, if that's changed in any way. Also looking at some of my colleagues across the nation to see maybe what they've pulled together for guidance on reopening schools or programming options. So those are things that are starting to kind of seep into our landscape right now. So we don't have any hard, fast information, like we can have so many kids together in a building. I know I was at, I think, last Friday's conversation with Arts Wisconsin, and I think I recognized some faces that were also there. And just hearing your concerns and wonderings when it came to just when people enter your facility, what does that look like, you know, as far as keeping things safe and healthy? So I don't know if I gave you specific things, but these are things that are in my head right now.
Yeah. So Julie is mentioning the listening session that
It was the Arts Wisconsin and Wisconsin Arts Board pulled together. Right, Karen? I think Karen's frozen. She frozen?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. I was like,
Yep.
So, yeah, what I was talking about was the Wisconsin Arts Board and Arts Wisconsin co-hosted a conversation with community members from all of the arts. And I think most of the people that were on that call are connected with facilities and different arts organizations across the state. And so they were kind of talking about what it looks like to reopen in their specific space and organization. And so for me, it was fascinating because there's so many similarities to what everyone here is grappling with, as well as what I'm thinking about as far as school specific parameters. The challenge is going to be that as far as school parameters, Department of Public Instruction will give guidance, but we won't be able to say you cannot open. I mean, it's going to be a matter of a school board, a superintendent, and a school community identifying what that looks like for their community, since there's, you know, various hotspots across our state. They're going to have different levels of readiness to open up their spaces. Is that kind of what you're seeing in your areas too, as far as opening, not reopening, hybrids, space use?
I'm betting you guys aren't seeing much yet at this point. I'm betting it's a pretty internal conversation. Am I wrong?
I think that's, yeah, no, I think that's correct. And as far as like, I mean, in our own little worlds, those of us that are in colleges or educational settings, we've gotten tastes of what things might look like. But I know like for my situation, that's all still in the works. So as far as like the public schools in my area, all I think any of us really know is that, obviously they're virtual learning through the end of the school year, and everything's kind of TBD beyond that. Yeah.
Yeah, basically schools will not be in session through the end of June. I mean, it's just how it is right now. So we won't see any of that, but we do have a lot of virtual learning opportunities that are happening now, but it's sporadic. It's not every district, it's not every teacher. I've talked to some teachers that say that they just don't have connections through technology with every kid. They don't have phone numbers that are up to date. They are missing resources. The broadband is spotty, as we know and we experience, right? So it's really just, there are so many different situations and scenarios going on out there right now.
Julie, you mentioned a conversation that would be taking place in June. Was that like an internal conversation that you will be having, or was that something that's like, open to the public that we could all listen in on?
It's, I usually send the information out. It's very heavy on arts educators, but everyone and anyone is available to pop in. I kind of allowed us to kind of breathe in, breathe out a little bit. We've been doing some watch parties where people choose between 3 different TED Talk videos, and we watch a 10-minute video together, and then we just have a really rich, fun discussion of what that looks like in our own professional lives, as well as maybe how it's connected to education. So I think that's kind of allowed us to just, just kind of breathe in, breathe out a little bit. But June will start, people are getting anxious and they want to talk now about fall, knowing that this year is kind of closing and there's been no closure at all, right? They're starting to, they want to know what's going to happen in fall. And since we don't totally know, I thought it still makes sense to open up a discussion and just let people share ideas with each other. And so that's going to start June 12th. I'll give the link to, who should I give it to, Karen?
Julie, I sent that. I actually sent that out to the WPN listserv. I sent the yesterday's newsletter out to everybody.
Oh, yay!
The link is
Okay.
in there. And just so you know, there's a bunch of sessions coming up. And
Yeah,
so
there's a
just
lot.
look at the June ones.
Yeah.
And Julie, would you welcome them to say, one of the things I'd like to talk about in this session is the possibility of field trips, or what virtual field trips might look like, or something like that?
We could, yeah. I think in the June sessions, that would make sense. I think I put June 12th. There's like 3 different June dates that I had. You can still hang out with us at the watch parties, though. I would say they're so much fun. They really are. They get a little nutty. I'm just saying, we either do a sing-along or a weird arts identification challenge. The last time we did a theater challenge, and I will admit that I thought I knew a lot about theater, and I bombed my own quiz. It was horrible. But we do a little bit of fun, goofy, fun stuff, and then we dive into the video, and then we do a discussion. So please come. It'll be just a lot of fun. And it's only 45 minutes of your week.
And I'm wondering if for the June ones, if, Julie, I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you.
Oh, no.
I wonder if for the June ones, if those of you who have arts ed staff, or you are the arts ed staff, might connect with your local school contact, if you have one in the school system, and invite them to come to that whatever June session you can do with them. And then maybe you could even do your own private debrief afterwards if you don't have time to explore what you need to within that 45-minute time frame.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I think
All
that'd
right.
be great. But yeah, come on down. It should be
Julie,
fun.
thanks for joining.
Yeah, I got your thing, like, oh, where are they? I don't even know where you are.
Here we are. And we're kind of a goofy bunch too, so we'll fit right in.
Hey.
Thank you so much, Julie. Thank you for jumping on with us, and thank you, Karen, for finding Julie and inviting her in. Julie, if you don't mind, maybe sharing an email or contact in case anybody has some one-on-one questions.
Absolutely.
If you could put that in the chat, that would be
Yep.
awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time and for joining us. This is,
Oh, you're welcome.
that'll be a great resource for a lot of us.
Yeah, thank you.
As we navigate this and certainly try to stay positive through it all. That's I think goal number one is
exactly,
and try not to get too bogged down by all of the concerns that we have. So thank you very much, and thank you, Karen.
You bet. Thanks,
Gonna go
everybody. I
ahead.
hope you have a great day, and please go outside, like Lonnie said, after this is done.